Okay, everyone, we are going to talk about the Karen Read retrial closing arguments. This is it. The only thing we're doing is waiting on the verdict. So we'll talk about how backwards so many things were. So first of all, the defense goes first and then the prosecution. I don't know why that is. That makes no sense to me, but okay. And let's talk about how Judge Cannone has ticked me off yet again. It is no secret that Judge Cannone has infuriated me from trial 1 to this one and throughout. What I have a problem with is that she did not allow the curative instruction. It's there for a reason. They called it a curative instruction about how Brennan had made a mistake and misled the jury about the holes in the sweatshirt, that those had come from the crime lab, not from the road, definitively. And he admitted that he made a mistake and that he suggested there be a curative instruction pointing that out. She didn't grant that instruction. But she's not biased. Okay. The prosecution either blatantly lied or really were incompetent in not realizing that the sweatshirt holes were cut from the forensics team with information that they had. Okay, whatever. And they did allow for the instruction to be added that the defense wanted for the second crime. So there are 3 charges against Karen Read. I will post those charges here. They wanted the second count, which includes the drinking under the influence leading to the negligence of which her negligence led to John O'Keefe's death. They wanted just a DUI, that the jurors could vote for the second count of just a DUI. And I think that was smart and strategic because I think because of Karen Read's interview clips coming in, I think it was much, much harder for plausible deniability in this case to be there than it was before, because Karen Read straight up admitted that she was drinking and driving. Now, it does help that multiple people, including Jen McCabe, who the prosecution rested a lot of their words on, had said that she seemed fine, that she was doing well, and everyone else who had interacted with her that night said that she wasn't acting belligerent or unusual for herself or anything like that. So having that, but because of the clips and her blood alcohol level being turned in without that plausible deniability that they had the first time, that absolutely changed everything. And so saying, okay, you know what, because they got hung, because of count 2 in the first jury. So to avoid that, they were like, let's give them something that they can agree on. If people were like, well, she was drinking, but I don't agree with all of this, but I agree with that part, blah, 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 blah. They were like, let's give them a unified thing of a DUI. Because just getting a DUI, if she's found not guilty on everything else and just the DUI, that's much better than all of the other things together. It's also much better than another hung jury by a lot. So what we have is the defense going first, which is crazy, and it was Jackson giving the arguments. And the way Jackson laid out his argument was starting off by saying there was no collision, there was no collision, there was no collision. And this goes along the lines of the Commonwealth sitting there going, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Having that statement be reiterated. There was no collision, there was no collision, there was no collision. And he used the Commonwealth's experts. He not only dismissed the experts, but used their data to help his case. He talked about Dr. Scorti-Bello. He went after Welcher. And he said that a lot of these timing things were done by Burgess mid-trial. Both of their experts that they brought in from Aperture Science, days before their testimony, they changed their reports to fit something else that happened earlier in the trial. They used a man who falsely presented his credentials on the stand, which is going to bite them. How much are you going to trust Burgess's words? And then he was talking about how the testing itself didn't prove anything, and that even if you do go with that, let's look. And they used a lot of Burgess's own clips to show and point out their part of the case. Like, if you get a fall backwards as demonstrated by Welcher, and they showed his thing, it doesn't come from getting sideswiped by a car. He goes, there are too many variables that the Commonwealth's own experts claimed were not explained, were not measured, that they did not know, and therefore they cannot prove and meet their burden of proof to you, that were unknown for their case. So they're trying to stitch things together. Well, the tail light got broken from the broken glass. Well, the glass pieces didn't match up. And he showed all the parts. And he talked about Proctor a lot. And he pointed out, and it seems that we had those motions that were mentioned 2 weeks ago about missing witness. And missing witness doesn't mean people need a search party to go find them. They were people that were mentioned and not brought to the stand. Proctor and Higgins were pointed out. And it went to the Bowden defense of the botched investigation. Because we knew that Brian Higgins had designs on her. We knew that he had access to Canton PD. And he used Kelly Devers' words against her. The ones that Brennan got out on his case in chief. Or on his cross-examination. He said, Kelly Dever herself said that her entire job rested on what she says on this stand after the commissioner told her to do the right thing. And he had a private meeting with a rookie cop to tell her that she was supported and to do the right thing, even though she couldn't remember for certain. And then she said very clear, concise things about what happened, and then she took it back. One way or another, she lied to another agency. Either she lied about it being a false memory, or she really did just fabricate this whole story. Another Canton police officer who's doing all the things. And then they were pointing out how Proctor wasn't called to stand, the main case agent, the lead investigator, not called. But it's okay. Jackson specifically said, you don't have to have his words on the stand. You have his words in his text. And he pointed out specifically, if you want to read these texts, they are in Exhibit 209. And then he read out some of the worst of the text messages. And pointed out how they were done hours after the incident. So he couldn't have had a good case and a good investigation. He was pinning it on her, insulting her to his buddies and to his friends. And he repeatedly pointed out him getting dismissed and fired. And that the prosecution, the Commonwealth, didn't want to bring Proctor because of how much of a problem he was. He hurts them, and they kept him from you. They could not handle that. He also pointed out how Brennan further messed up with the shirt, that he pointed out on the plexiglass holes here, 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 and here. And those were for them, their team. The Commonwealth made those holes. The forensics team from the Commonwealth made those holes, and Brennan knew that, and it was shameful the way he tried to mislead you. And he goes, I challenge him to explain that to you. Then he continued on with, he said a few things about Jen McCabe, making her words more, that all the reports, all of the things, the transcripts from the grand jury trial and etc. Nothing about this I hit him statement. Admitting that she influenced Carrie Roberts, which led her to lie to the grand jury. And he was really emphatic about something. Brian Higgins' accessibility to Canton police. that Brian Higgins had romantic designs on Karen Reed, and then what does he see? He sees Karen Reed getting kissed on the forehead at the waterfall and getting all cuddly and huggy with John O'Keefe. And he was like, well, in his text message to her, he had a beef. And then they played showing Brian Albert and Brian Higgins kind of play fighting with each other. And when I had watched Emily D. Baker's coverage of this, I agreed with her. So these are her words, not mine directly, but I do agree with them. That it didn't really look like they were play fighting, that they were showing how aggressive they were. That Brian Higgins was trying to do the look at me, get Karen Reed's attention, hey, kind of a thing. And Jackson pointed out how everyone else there, Jen McCabe, the Alberts, Higgins, all those people, had already been drinking for a really long time. And then Brian Higgins, who barely knew John O'Keefe, had designs on his girlfriend, was suddenly like, hey, come party with us. Where are you? You coming over? A friendly invitation? Or a deadly invitation? And then all the people who didn't see him, they brought up the weatherman, who had said that there was only enough snow for that you could track a cat. That the vision wasn't that split. How about the plow driver who didn't see that? How about the vehicle that was conveniently moved where John O'Keefe's body supposedly was found? That he had to have died somewhere warmer. How did his phone end up under his shoulder, under his body? And he was pointing out where it's like, we talked about phone temperature dropping, but it didn't drop at the rate that this expert said. So he couldn't have been out in the cold as long as they claimed. Other people would have saw his body, and they didn't. And they were really, really just emphasizing, every time they showed a clip or anything on the screen, they showed a note card that had a bullet point of what it was. And he goes, every one of those note cards is doubt. If you agree with or are holding one of those cards in your hand that you can't explain this, that you weren't convinced, that's reasonable doubt. And you need to vote not guilty. If it's doubt, it's not guilty. And he was really emphatic about that, which is important. He even specifically said, we're not looking for most likely or very likely or probably, maybe. Are you convinced this is what happened? Because according to every expert, his injuries are inconsistent with being hit by a car. He has no injuries to his hand that was supposedly hit by a car while holding a glass. The evidence doesn't match up. The injuries don't match up. The temperatures don't match up. What matches up is everything Proctor touched was contaminated by him with no accountability. And remember his words, no way she skates. Pin it on the girl. And that the homeowner's not catching any flack because he's a Boston cop too. And a lot of things he once again brought up about the dog bite, how their family pet was suddenly rehomed. They got rid of her. And that no one knew where the dog was. But John O'Keefe had, by many medical accounts, dog bite wounds. And it was emphasized that Dr. Russell also brought up the grief thing. That, yeah, Karen Reed might have said, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Is he dead? What happened? Blah, blah, blah. That's a trauma response called extreme grief reaction that happens to patients who are in shock or in a severe traumatic situation. That it's actually really common. And that those just saying whirling thoughts and kind of acting frantic and out of control and chaos like Jen McCabe described, is a common thing of people who are traumatized. So that's why she wasn't saying a confession, Jackson told them. The Commonwealth wants to twist it to make it seem like her words are a confession. She was confused. She was scared. She was traumatized. And an ER medical doctor told you that. The Commonwealth doesn't want to acknowledge that because they're not acknowledging the truth. We're here for the truth. And then he ended it up with not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. When it was time for Brennan to take over, Brennan did a much better job than Lally did. But he mentioned Proctor about this much and even definitively called him that the defense is trying to make Proctor into a boogeyman. He was the main case agent. He wasn't the sole person working this case. And all these other people had their procedures lined up. He didn't acknowledge the misgivings of Burgess or himself. He didn't mention the sweatshirt and the holes in the sweatshirt at all. He mostly focused on replaying Karen Reed's clips because, again, I'm sticking for that he is banking on those clips of proving her guilt. Multiple people said she hit him, I hit him, I hit him. People don't write every little thing down the report. And he really tried to distance the reports. And he talked about Jen McCabe a lot. Like a lot. It was very unusual considering how little the defense brought her up. Having this emphasis on how much trust in Jen McCabe the jurors should have. How Proctor was really a meaningless small part in the whole case and trial. And he didn't explain Brian Higgins at all. He didn't explain why you didn't see them. And he didn't even, throw Proctor under the bus enough. He wasn't like, yeah, I recognize he's a bad person. And that he may have effed up in his text messages and that's why he got dismissed. He really just said they're trying to make him be this bigger deal than he is. They're still trying to distance him from the case. And I don't think that it sold well. It didn't sell me very well. I wasn't picking that up. But he kept saying stuff about Karen Reed's words. And he kept saying the probability, the possibility. And I don't think that helps your case. When there's multiple what ifs, there's a jury instruction that says you have to vote not guilty. You have to vote in favor of the defendant. So I think him bringing up maybes doesn't really help his case. He did emphasize her drinking, that there was a fight, that you saw the fight that they were having, and that when people are in public, they don't always bring their drama to the forefront. And so, yeah, what they had in a text message was what was really going on, and then they put on a public display. They got into another fight. She made the decision. She drove forward and then backed up the car, hit John O'Keefe, and then drove away and left him to die in the snow. So it wasn't a bad argument, but I think he's relying way too much on what people said Karen Reed said and on Karen Reed's interview clips. That's where I think he is putting, that's the pancake batter to his case. And I'm not sure it's as strong as he thinks it is. I think it definitely goes to her drinking and driving. And they're going, you make rash decisions when you're intoxicated. They were already fighting. Karen Reed has been known to have a spicy temper. And that she had already freaked out on him once. And then she thinks that he's going to be with another person on that street. And I don't know. Brennan's argument was a little bit shorter than Jackson's. They were already only given an hour and 15 minutes, 31 days of case. And they're only given an hour and 15 minutes to summarize it? I give you more than that in these summaries altogether. But I don't know. I guess that's to make the main points emphasized, and so that the lawyers can't waffle and tangent too much. Or maybe Judge Bev is just over all of this and wants to get it done and over with. She gave the jury their instructions, and they were sent to deliberations for a little bit. They had lunch, and then Judge Canone said, I was informed that you all want to go home, because she had wanted them to stay late to have longer deliberations. The jurors did not want that, apparently. They were dismissed, but she was very emphatic about, she told them the same thing. She do not do any outside research. Make sure you're careful with social media. If you read or see anything about the case, make sure you tell us about it. And do not discuss this case with anyone. And when she got to that point, she said, and do not discuss this case with anyone, includes each other, outside of the deliberation rooms. You are only allowed to talk about the case, even with each other, in the deliberation room. Once you come out of the deliberation room, you can no longer talk about the court case. Not even with each other. That includes alternates. You must not discuss the case with anybody. You are not now open to talk about the case in general. Only in the deliberation rooms. You are still prohibited from discussing the case at all. And I think that came from her concerns with the jurors that she had admonished before. She had already twice admonished the jury. And I think she was talking to only a couple jurors in particular, the ones who she had the second time separate from sitting near each other because of their muttering commentary things that were going on between them. And it was all, and because she had to tell them about not making faces, not sighing too loud, or doing anything that is audibly indicative of their feelings on a particular matter. And so I think because she had to already admonish them twice about expression on the witness stand, she really wanted to make it incredibly clear that just because you're not allowed to talk about the case in the deliberation room does not mean that you're allowed to talk to each other about it outside. That counts as like outside research and discussion, which is not okay. And I really do not think she would have been that emphatic about it had those other problems not happened. But that's where we are. We're on Verdict Watch. I will link below for you to watch those closing arguments. Who do you think made the closing argument? Where are you on this case? I'm still leaning towards not guilty, but thinking that the jury will meet in the middle on the DUI. That is where I think that will go. I think that the problems with the second charge from the first trial will be alleviated by them being able to just vote on the DUI and not the other charges, or they're going to entirely go not guilty because maybe after everything that's happened, they just don't believe the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth brought a much better case this time, a much stronger case this time, and I think that the clips definitely hurt Karen Read. And I think this being the second trial, so the defense wasn't given as many gotcha moments, like with Katie McLaughlin, Jen McCabe behaving much more calm and much better on the stand, definitely wasn't as beneficial to her. But I think Kelly Dever, I think Dr. Welcher, and Shannon Burgess really shot Brennan's case in the foot, and then him with the holes in the shirt are not going to help, because remember, and with him not showing all the pictures of Randy in the one with Dr. Rentschler in that day, I think it was 32. No, I think it was 30. And so it's like and not bringing Brian Higgins, whose name was said over and over, not bringing Proctor, the shirt thing. I think that all of that stuff, the changing of testimony halfway through trial, I think a lot of that is going to be the most hurtful to the Commonwealth, because it's like, what else are you hiding from us? What else was changed that we weren't allowed to know about? Why did you keep stuff from us? And I think that what hurts the defense is sometimes they went after a few witnesses too hard that didn't need it. I think that the restricted witness list from the Commonwealth hurt the defense. But not having rebuttal witnesses hurt the Commonwealth in their closing arguments, because it opened Jackson up to being able to point out that they didn't have somebody to combat the dog wounds. They didn't have somebody to combat this, that, the other thing. So if you didn't bring rebuttal witnesses, now they get to say that. Look at all the things they didn't show you. But we have to wait. Everyone sees things differently. There are still people in this world who think that Karen Read is 100% guilty. And we will have to figure that out from there. So I'll see you later. Tell me your thoughts. Bye.